So it's the 13th of June, late in the evening, UK time, and we've got a Mercury retrograde coming up. So for the first 20 years of my astrological life, I just did what it says on the tin. I read the books, I stuck with the theories, and over the next 10 to 15 years, I started playing around with it. And in the last 5 years or so, I've been sort of working out some new ideas, not so much as to the way retrogrades work for everyone else, but the way they work for me. So this is my take on retrogrades, perhaps from a 2020 perspective. Now we're heading into a Mercury retrograde. It starts in 4.5 days time, and then it runs through till about the 12th, 13th of July. During this period, Mercury will go, well, it's already gone forward past the Sun. It's going to go retrograde back over the Sun, and then it's going to go forward again later on towards the end of July, start of August. So it's going to hit the Sun 3 times, as it does every time. This Mercury retrograde is not impacting on Jupiter or Saturn or Pluto. It's not impacting on Neptune. And it's not touching Venus either. This Mercury retrograde will be sextiling Uranus 3 times, which is rather nice because Mercury and Uranus, after all, are good friends. But this Mercury retrograde will be squaring Mars, and indeed over much of July, from about the 7th, 8th of July onwards through to the end of July, Mercury is never going to be more than about 3 or 4 degrees away from squaring Mars. So we've got a Mercury square Mars for 3 weeks in July, to which I can only say, ouch. So, particularly with all retrogrades, yeah, all of them, I've kind of developed over the last few years my own idea on how they actually work. So you've got the forward pass, where they move forward over a point, ready to the point where they stand still and start moving backwards. Now this always brings some type of event, action, decision. Often something that's over-exaggerated, over-amplified, and that doesn't actually end up working that well, but nevertheless it brings lots of information, lots of ideas, lots of potentials and options, and sometimes lots of actions. And then there's the retrograde period itself. Now this is often seen as a time of retrospect, reassessment, re-evaluation, reconsideration. Did I get it right? Does this need fixing? Does it need tweaking? Is it okay? Shall I move ahead with it? It's a time of re-evaluation. And then there's the third phase when the planet moves forward again for the 3rd time. At which point the process is repeated, but this time hopefully correctly, or past mistakes are consolidated and established and things really do screw up. Now there's a little bit of difference with the nature of the planet doing the retrograde. When you're looking at the outer planets, for example Neptune and Pluto, depending on their distance from the Sun, like for example now and for the long-term future, Neptune and Pluto are going to be going over, certainly Pluto is going to be going over certain points 5 times over a 2-year period. So there is no point on its retrograde cycle which only gets 1 pass. Neptune, basically everybody gets hit 3 times by Neptune over a period of a year. Similarly, 95%, 98% of people get affected by Uranus over a year-long period as opposed to a one-off situation. Saturn is a bit of a different story. Saturn has one of those cycles where it moves forward, stands still, goes backwards, moves forward, stands still, goes backwards, and moves forward again. But there's that little bit in the middle where Saturn only passes over a planet 1 time. So certain individuals each year get 1 Saturn pass on their Sun instead of 3. Often this is suggested. I suggest to clients with this that when this happens, that means they get 9 months worth of crap in 2 weeks. So it's over quickly, but it's a short, sharp shock instead of a long, drawn out one. Jupiter goes, there's lots of places in the sky where Jupiter only hits once. As with Mars only goes retrograde once every 2 years. Venus goes retrograde 5 times every 8 years. That's when it switches from being the morning star to the evening star and vice versa. And Mercury goes retrograde 7 times every 2 years. Generally for somewhere between always for somewhere between 21 to 26 days. Now this current Mercury retrograde is taking place in a narrow space of Cancer. It's taking place between 5 degrees and 15 degrees of Cancer. It just happens to be on top of my sun, but hey, we all get our fair share of that over a course of years. So look at your own individual charts. Look at the first half of Cancer in your own birth chart and see what house it's in and see what aspects that area of Cancer makes to other planets in your horoscope. And that's where the Mercury retrograde will be. Now, certain rules around Mercury retrograde just never change. It is safe to say that during a Mercury retrograde, communications generally break down. Travel plans don't work out the way you expect. So if you're going to be doing traveling during this Mercury retrograde, factor in some wriggle room. Give yourself an extra day or two to compensate for missed planes or missed trains or punctures or delays. And don't be surprised if email confirmations don't come through or phone calls get missed or there's some type of misunderstanding. One of the most common things I find is that during a Mercury retrograde, everybody hears, but how many people actually listen? Not many. And there's a difference between listening and hearing. Same as there's a difference between meaning and understanding. It's easy to get people to understand. You open your mouth and the logic comes out. But when you're trying to get people to know what you mean, then that doesn't involve just logic and rationality. It also involves metaphor and analogy and facial characteristic and body language. It's about the meaning, not just the understanding. So we're heading into this Mercury retrograde now in the first half of Cancer, and during this time it is going to be squaring Mars in Aries, and particularly in the latter 3 weeks of July. So it does say to me that there's going to be quite a degree of irritability, frustration and impatience. Mercury square Mars is one of the rarer aspects in the sky. Normally, because Mercury moves so fast, when Mercury does square Mars, which happens on average maybe 5 times every 3 years, it lasts a couple of days. So it's one of the rarer aspects in astrology. 1, maybe 2% of people have it. The rarest aspect with this combination is Mercury opposite Mars. That happens on average once every 14, 15, 16 months for about a day and a half, most of the time. Very rare aspect in the chart. But Mercury square Mars, it's going to be there for 3 weeks this time. So there's going to be an added degree of irritation, impatience, frustration, volatility. People are going to get a lot more tense and easily irritated. And bearing in mind what's coming up in August as well as July, then that's just going to add to an already frustrating situation in the world. So I'm sorry to say this, but that Mercury-Mars square that's coming up during the Mercury retrograde and immediately after it finishes, it's only going to add another layer of complexity and intensity to the current state of the world. 2020 is not an easy time by a long chalk. I will be pleased when Mercury stops going retrograde and starts moving forward again. This will be about the 12th, 13th of July. And it doesn't mean it's going to get easier from that time, but it does mean that a lot of the uncertainty and the impatience will stop, and then we'll be able to start seeing actions and people will start re-emerging into the world. Let's hope so. Catch you later. Bye.